So what exactly is Scavengers? Well, it's a new Battle Royale, sort of. It's being developed by Midwinter Entertainment and Improbable, who have previously been involved with games such as Halo, Gears of War and the Battlefield series, and is currently in open beta. It is technically a Battle Royale, as you'll still be dropped into a game as a team of 3 and have to scavenge for weapons and equipment, but it involves a bunch of unique mechanics that really separate it from others in this genre. Firstly and most prominently is that it is PvE as well as PvP. The premise of the game is to gather orange data points from marked locations around the map and then exfil with as many of these as possible. These locations have AI enemies guarding them, which are hostile to player characters, and will fight you as you try to gather data points. There's varying different enemy types with different visual styles and attacks, depending on the area that they are in. These can include snipers, bears, and big blobby looking boys. To gain the data points, you'll have to clear out these locations and activate and then defend the beacons while they spew them out. Doing so will spawn more enemies to defend against, and you'll also be visible to other players who may try to ambush you. The AI enemies themselves aren't hugely difficult to defeat, but do add another level of challenge and complexity, while also being an interesting gameplay twist that isn't found in many other BR games. Another really major part of this game is the actual map and environment itself, which will also be trying to kill you. The game is set in a frozen version of Earth after a collision with an asteroid and a virus breakout. But all of the ice isn't just for show. The zone in this game is the eye of a massive storm, which is far more dangerous and threatening than the zones of many other Battle Royale games, as well as there being several smaller snowstorms scattered across the map at any given time. These storms not only damage you while you're inside them, but also lower your maximum health and drain your stamina while you remain too cold, so you'll have to find a fire or another way to warm up quickly. Your health, stamina and temperature are all factors that need to be managed throughout the game and can be restored with various items, however your armour is equipped by default and regenerates outside of combat. Similarly to how Apex Legends has its own legends, this game has different explorers which have different abilities such as a bubble shield or EMP blast, and signature weapons such as a powerful pump shotgun or long range sniper. This really helps strengthen the gameplay variety in my opinion, and adds more complexity and options for each fight. Each of these explorers earns XP individually and has a separate level, which brings with it new unlocks and items to craft for each one. Crafting is also a huge factor in this game, as alongside gathering data points in the matches, you'll also pick up scrap, which can be used to level up your armour and craft items for your explorer. The system is really great in my opinion, as it not only adds another layer of complexity, but more specifically means you can play more proactively and generate items in response to different situations. For example, if you got caught out in the storm, you'll be able to use your scrap to craft a warming device to keep your explorer's temperature up. Or if you find yourself about to go up against another player squad, you can quickly craft a grenade or your character's signature weapon to help you give you the edge in the fight. Speaking of weapons in this game, they're quite interesting. The ground loot seems to be fairly limited, with an emphasis on projectile-based weapons such as bows and crossbows. There are of course also pistols, shotguns and machine guns like you would expect, and these are all sorted by varying coloured rarities. But the aim is quite clearly for you to craft your character's signature weapon and then keep your second weapon as a spare, as your signature weapon is far more effective. Winning in this game isn't as simple as being the last team alive and eliminating everyone else like it is in many similar other games, but instead here it's about the amount of data points you've been able to extract on the dropship once the timer reaches 0. This means that theoretically you can dominate all the other teams in the lobby, steal their data points and take control of the dropship to ensure your victory. Or alternatively, you can spend the entire game gathering data points from around the map and then sneak onto the dropship within the last second without having even seen an enemy, if that's more your style. So is it actually any good? Well, a lot of the mechanics introduced in this game certainly make it unique, and I actually quite like this game, despite not being a fan of the Battle Royale genre. There's none of the extended periods of downtime that usually put me off these games, as Scavengers is always giving you something to do. Whether you're gathering data points, dodging storms, or trying to track down enemy teams, there's always something going on. However, it is very clearly not finished, which makes sense considering it's currently in its first day of closed beta. But there are a few issues I feel it's important to discuss. Firstly, it runs really poorly. I have a decent and up-to-date PC with fairly high specs, but I suffer heavy performance issues when initially entering into games, and more importantly when getting into firefights. Most of the time the game will sit around 140 FPS on the lowest settings at 1440p, but it can drop as low as 40 to 50 frames when multiple explorers are using their abilities or firing weapons, which is seriously off-putting as I often feel like I'm coming off worse in fights due to issues outside of my control. The movement in this game also needs a slight reworking in my opinion, as it can be a little clunky and rigid at times, with things like reloading and switching weapons taking a little too long, making you feel somewhat sluggish and unresponsive in tight moments. I think this game could really benefit from climbing as well, as it would enable players to make way more use of the verticality of the map and structures in this game, as well as adding another level of depth. The map itself isn't particularly visually distinctive, and a lot of areas look the same, which makes it confusing to navigate. I've also found myself getting pushed into dead ends or chokes by the storm that I'm unable to get away from. This isn't helped by there being very little indication the storm is actually approaching your location until it's literally on top of you. You can eventually learn to gravitate towards the centre of the map to avoid it, but even then it can still catch you out. The PvPvE system is something interesting, but it has its own issues. At times it's hard to differentiate between AI enemies and actual players, which is a problem because there's a massive difficulty discrepancy between the two. Pinging an enemy at the moment can actually potentially put you at a disadvantage, as depending on their distance from you, the red ping icon may actually cover their entire player model and make you unable to see them. And finally, with the way that this game is designed and its pacing, it will mean that in a majority of matches there will be absolutely zero fights with other players until the very final area of the dropship, at which point all hell will break loose and everyone begins fighting everyone else. Rising action is great for building up excitement in a game, and ideally you'd want the climax of the battle to be pretty wild, but currently it's too sudden and dramatic instead of gradually raising the stakes over time. It's a bit like if Thanos had only turned up in the last 10 minutes of the Avengers and had just instantly snapped his fingers and deleted everyone without any build-up. Despite all of this though, it has enough unique mechanics to stand out from its rivals in the genre, and it's still early enough in its development for all these problems to be fixed. So if you're wondering whether it's worth picking up a beta key and trying it out, then I'd still say yes. It might have its issues at the moment, but I wish more developers would take risks and try out new ideas like this, instead of just making the same games every year, and I'm really interested to see how this one grows. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and subscribe if you're interested in hearing more about new games. Oh, also, this announcer really just needs to shut the f*** up.
You don't want to go anywhere without arming yourself first. Search for a weapon. I'm reading hostile outlanders in the ruins ahead. If you neutralize them, you can take their things. I would advise you to keep an eye out for supplies. You would be shocked at the things your keeper can make out of a little scrap.